Welcome back, everybody. We are now in week 10 of the trimester. Time is just flying, for me at least. We are very close to the end of the trimester, and we've covered quite a bit of material up until this point. I commend you all for hanging in there during those 2 weeks of second order cybernetics. I know that material can be very dense and complicated and sometimes difficult to make our way through, but I'm hopeful that we are going to now start, particularly in this week, to grasp onto some more tangible things that help you to make sense of the concepts and put them into a better, clearer context with respect to how you're going to be using the ideas in your work. And that's precisely what we're talking about this week. We're looking at how we begin to think like family therapists. What is it that distinguishes family therapists from other psychotherapists? And what is the way in which family therapists tend to think about their work and tend to approach their work with clients? The readings that you had this week, though they were lengthy, I hope were helpful to you in conceptualizing what exactly sets a family therapist apart from a traditional, maybe intrapsychic therapist. And each of the articles took a different and unique perspective on what it means to think like a family therapist. In the Cox article, it was approached from the perspective of looking at families as systems and helping to draw about some understanding of how therapists perceive their clients as human systems and what difference that makes for their work in the therapeutic encounter. The second article that you read, in addition to the book reading, was from Harleen Anderson and Harry Gulishin. They collaborated with one another to develop a model in family therapy that's known as postmodern collaborative language systems. And that model essentially is centered on the ideas of how language and meaning are infused throughout the therapeutic encounter. And the ideas that Anderson and Gulishin draw upon and share in those articles go beyond just their model of family therapy. They're really foundational elements of what it means to think like a family therapist and do clinical work as a family therapist. So this lecture is going to be grounded in the ideas and principles set forth in that article. And hopefully you'll come out of this having a little bit of a clearer sense of how everything we've talked about so far gets funneled down into a practical approach to psychotherapy. Now remember that the purpose of this class is not for you to emerge from it knowing exactly how to be in the room as a family therapist. All of the other courses that you are going to take, most importantly, of course, your practicum experiences, are going to be what essentially allows you to really understand and embody what it is to be a therapist. But from a conceptual perspective, I hope that this class expands your focus and gives you some more clarity about what it means to be relational, what it means to be systemic, and what sets family therapists apart from other therapists. My hope is that by the end of this lecture, you'll have a better sense of that and we can begin to have some really rich discussions about it. So let's jump right in. I want to begin by overviewing the 5 foundational premises of family therapy set forth in the Anderson and Gulishin article. They begin by saying that human systems are language generating and simultaneously meaning generating systems. So what the heck do they mean by that? What they're basically saying is that everything about human systems, human relationship systems, which is what we've been talking about throughout our time in this class, everything about them that we can observe, that we can describe, and that we can participate in has ultimately to do with communication and meaning. Those are the cornerstones of human systems processes: communication and meaning. It's the glue that binds the members of a system. As we talked about when we discussed second order cybernetics, therapy itself is a system. The therapist plus the client or client family constitutes its own unique human system. And as second order cybernetics shows us, we are part of that system which also includes our clients. And our work as therapists, therefore, is a language-based and meaning-making endeavor. Now, I want to spend some time on this, particularly because I saw it come up in a lot of your questions this last week in the discussion board. And the question was basically, how is it that we can intervene and create therapeutic change with the families that we work with the clients that we work with, and the systems that we work with, without engaging in that sort of conscious control that we talked about, right? That was warned about in the articles that you read, that particularly Bateson talked about. How do we avoid conscious control in an effort to preserve what Bateson called ecosystemic balance in the system, right? And the way that we do that, essentially, is number one, by being mindful of our part in the system. Being mindful that we are not just outside, impartial, objective observers of these human systems that we're working with, but we're participating in them. We're contained within them, right? So number one is we're aware of that. And so we proceed with caution and curiosity about what's going on in the system. And we attempt to keep in mind at all times the balance of the system, meaning the harmony of the relationships among members of that system, right? And we do that using the tools that are available to us as therapists. And remember, guys, our tools are pretty basic and limited. They include our presence in the room as a breathing, thinking, emoting, living human, right? Our presence is one of our tools. And how we utilize that tool is to be mindful of our judgments, our biases, our perceptions, our perspectives, the questions that we ask, the way that we approach our clients, the way we communicate with our clients, the way we interpret what we're seeing, what we're hearing from our clients, right? And the other tool that we have available to us, the biggest tool that we have available to us, is language. The words that we use in the session and the words that our clients use in the session. Those two things coupled together allow us to understand what's going on with our clients, to really understand it from their unique perspectives, in their unique and significant contexts. Make meaning of it, make sense of it, right? Honor the stability of it, honor the homeostasis that's already there. And then using our language through the statements that we make, through the reflections that we make, through the questions that we ask our clients, through our understanding of the things that they say back to us, the things that they tell us that give us access to their reality. Using that language, introducing change in the system. And we've talked about many ways in which therapists can do that. Think back to reframes, for example. What is a reframe if not taking the same behavior or the same description and in language, through the use of our language, creating a new meaning for it, right? That's what a reframe is. That's a therapeutic intervention. It's all happening in the room, but the clients are taking it with them. What they're taking with them is the meaning that they carry out of the session from the language that was used in the dialogical back and forth exchange between them and us. That's how we create therapeutic change in the therapy system. So we do it by being mindful of our presence with our clients as a significant one, our participation and inclusion in the system, the meaning we make of what's going on with the system, the language that we use to present new possibilities for change in the system, and the meaning that our clients make of that language. All of that brings about therapeutic change. And we can do that only when we recognize, as Anderson and Galushian point out, that what human systems ultimately are language generating and meaning generating systems. Okay, that's what family therapists do. That's how family therapists think. So here's premise number 2. Meaning and understanding are both socially and intersubjectively constructed. A simpler way of putting that is this. In order for an event, exchange, relationship, or human dynamic to take on meaning, the people who take part in it must agree that they are experiencing the same event. Dialogue is the means by which people in relationship negotiate the meaning of their interactions. Okay? Now, here is something that requires us to rest on some postmodern ideas, and we'll talk next week a little bit more about postmodern epistemology. There is a theoretical premise underlying this, and the theoretical premise is that most events, most exchanges, most dynamics in human relationships are essentially neutral. Most of this stuff is meaningless until we assign meaning to it. So most exchanges and events within a family are neutral until the people who take part in it agree, not in some conciliatory, collaborative fashion, but agree that they're experiencing the same event by naming it as such. This is an argument. We're having an argument right now. Both people in that argument, or the many people involved in that argument, have to co-sign on that reality, that what's taking place here is not just a mutual exchange of words that's essentially neutral, but that this exchange, this mutual exchange of words, has a particular meaning, and that meaning is that it's an argument. The bedwetting behavior of a 5-year-old and the parent's inability to align with one another in their efforts to address it and attempt to ameliorate it for their child, all of that is essentially neutral behavior. It's just behavior, right? But it takes on meaning when everyone who's participating agrees that they're experiencing it, coalesces around it in some way with the language that they use about it, and if it brings them to the therapy room, agrees that it's a problem in some way. All of this happens through language. Dialogue is the means by which people in relationship negotiate the meaning of their interactions. And I want you to hold on to this, and I want you to look at the world around you through this lens. After this lecture, I want you to observe the exchanges around you and the exchanges that you're participating in, and recognize how much dialogue, communication, language has to do with all of it, with all of our exchanges, with all of our relationships and human dynamics. It's the means by which our interactions, the events that happen, our exchanges with each other, take on meaning. For better, for worse. It means nothing until the people who are participating in it give it meaning through the ways that they talk about it. So as I said before, the way this applies to the therapeutic context is that any system that arrives in therapy, any family system that shows up at a therapist's office, right, and invites the therapist into the system, any system in therapy is one that has essentially coalesced around some problem, right? The problem is what makes the therapy relevant. The problem is what gives meaning to the therapeutic exchange. And that system will be engaged in evolving language and meaning specific to itself, specific to its organization, and specific to its dissolution around the problem. So here's the shorthand way of saying it. Problems are constructed and deconstructed, organized and dissolved in the context of therapy. And how does that happen, ultimately? Think about it. How is it that therapy actually works? There's no magic wand involved. There are no pills or procedures involved, right? We don't go in manually and manipulate as a, say, chiropractor would, right? Or as a surgeon would. Manipulate anything physically to bring about change. We don't break apart the system itself, hopefully, although sometimes that happens in the case of, say, like divorce or breakup. If that's the outcome of therapy, if that's the choice that client families make, is to create actual disruptions in the system. But usually that's not what happens. Usually what happens is a construction and deconstruction of problems, an organization and dissolution of problems within the therapeutic dialogical exchange. In our conversations with our clients is where all of this stuff happens. Clients come in describing an exchange that's taking place in their relationships, and they're describing it in a particular kind of way as problematic, right? They have agreed implicitly that this thing that they're coming in with, the bedwetting behavior, the disagreement about parenting styles, the consistent arguing about household chores, the mother's complicated grief over the family pet that's keeping her from holding up her end of the bargain in terms of, what she's responsible in the household, on and on and on and on and on. Could be anything they show up with. But what they bring to us is a language-based problem that they've constructed by agreeing that this set of events is problematic. Through language, through conversation, through the questions that we ask, the client's answers to those questions, the meaning that the clients make of that back and forth language exchange, over the course of time, deconstructs the problem, makes it, when therapy is successful, so that that thing they came in with that was problematic is no longer a problem. And that happens in a number of different ways. It could be that the deconstruction of the problem happens as a consequence of the conversation, the therapeutic conversation between the clients and the therapist, generating different kinds of perspectives among the clients so that suddenly mom sees it the same way dad sees it. Just by answering a particular question from the therapist or thinking about something that she hadn't previously thought about, she can see things differently. And so suddenly she and dad aren't so far apart in their perspectives anymore. And because of that, suddenly this thing that was really problematic, meaning their disagreement about how to parent their kid, just isn't a problem anymore. Because she's able to enter his reality and share it with him. And so that problem gets dissolved. Other times it may happen that a new perspective or a new context that comes about through the therapeutic conversation inspires the clients to go home and do things differently. Because they see things differently, they act differently. And when they act differently, their exchanges with each other are no longer problematic. So there, again, the problem is deconstructed. Okay? So systems in therapy have coalesced around a problem. And the goal of therapy is the dissolution of that problem. Make sense? And as you can see, the construction and deconstruction, organization and dissolution of problems that takes place in therapy, again, going back to numbers 1 and 2, happens through a process that's grounded primarily in language and meaning. Number 4, As I've mentioned, therapy is a linguistic event. It's an event that takes place in language through what we refer to as the therapeutic conversation. Again, problems are constructed and deconstructed, organized and dissolved in the context of therapy through the therapeutic conversation. Everything that takes place in therapy, the new meanings that come about, the new understandings that clients walk out with, the dissolution of problems like we talked about in the previous slide, and ultimately what we describe as change, all take place through dialogue. Okay, so this is a rewording of number 3, but it bears repeating. Everything that we've been talking about up to this point, all the concepts from first-order cybernetics, all the concepts from second-order cybernetics, are designed to give you a particular perspective as a therapist, to give you a particular view, as a therapist. How you use that, how you create therapeutic change by knowing the difference between circular causality or linear causality, or negative feedback versus positive feedback, or second-order change versus first-order change. That all takes on meaning when and only when we are in the therapeutic encounter. And that encounter consists exclusively of dialogue between us and our clients. All of that stuff influences we see when we observe our client systems, how we interpret what we see, how we approach our work with our clients, what we get curious about, what questions we ask, and how we respond to our clients' questions. All of that happens in language. So you can see here the very real significance of the words that we use, of the language that we use, of the language that our clients use in the therapeutic exchange. Because language communicates meaning, and shifts in meaning lead to dissolution of problems. And after all, that's the ultimate goal of therapy. The problems that brought our clients into our offices, when they leave, are no longer problems. So, knowing what we now know, we've got a very particular job as a family therapist, right? And that job, the role of the therapist who thinks like a family therapist, who thinks this way, is that of a master conversational artist, right? Remember that one to put on your business cards. Master conversational artist. Here's a better one. Architect of dialogue, whose expertise is in creating a space and facilitating a dialogical conversation, a conversation that takes place in language. That is our ultimate job. Our ultimate job is not to diagnose people. It's not to determine sickness versus health. It's not to control family systems. It's not to go in and unilaterally change systems based on what we think human systems are supposed to look like and operate like. Our job is to create a space for and facilitate a dialogical conversation. So when we act as family therapists, we act as both participant observers, like we talked about last week and the week before, and participant masters of the therapeutic conversation. Our job is to be the masters of the back and forth exchange in conversation with our clients. That's how we use our primary tools to their optimum benefit for our clients. That's where as Bradford Keeney has described it, pragmatics and aesthetics of family therapy come together. The practical and the artful, the science and the art of family therapy comes together when we perceive our role as both participant observer and participant master of the therapeutic conversation with our clients. We orchestrate the conversations as an orchestra conductor orchestrates the music, folding in each particular note, knowing when to call in the brass section or the percussion, knowing when to quiet down one part of the musical system so that another part can shine, keeping pace with the conversation, creating and sustaining rhythm and flow. Right? That's what we do as therapists. All of what we do as therapists happens in an exchange of language. And through that exchange of language is where new meanings come about, new perspectives come about, new realities come about. And through those new perspectives and realities, our clients, as autonomous, self-correcting systems, do things differently in their exchanges with each other and understand their exchanges with each other differently in such a way so that the problems that brought them into our offices are no longer problems. And this may sound hard to do, but the truth is that when it comes to dialogue, nothing remains the same. Things are always evolving in dialogue. With every word that we use, we open a door to new ways of looking at things. With every word that our clients use, a door is opened to help us understand them just a little bit more, to help us see the spaces that can be opened up to create the possibility for change and difference. Change in therapy is no more than changing meaning derived through dialogue and conversation. The dialogue that takes place in therapy is active. It's a generative event through which the therapist and clients negotiate meaning and reach new understandings in an evolving feedback process. The more they tell us, the more our understanding expands. The more our understanding expands, the more we can introduce new possibilities for change. The more they see new possibilities for change, the more their perspectives open up. And the more that they can tell us, the more that we understand, the more we can open up that space for change. And so it's this feedback process that creates more and more and more and more and more possibilities for how families can do things differently and experience their exchanges differently, and free themselves of the problems that brought them into therapy. Now, those of you who studied psychology, those of you who have taken interest in traditional intrapsychic models are recognizing, if you hadn't already, how very different a perspective this is from the traditional perspectives underlying most approaches to therapy. Doesn't make us better, doesn't make us superior. Makes us family therapists. What we're talking about here is the perspective and approach to family therapists that sets us apart. It's what we mean when we talk about family therapists as systemic, as relational, and as we'll talk about next week, postmodern. But let's get back to our lecture. I want to talk a little bit about the communication contract for the family therapist. The first part of this contract is the therapist keeps inquiry, right? The line of questions, curious questions that take place in the therapeutic exchange, within the parameters of the problem as it's described by the clients. Okay, this is important. The problem is not the problem that we decide is problematic, right? If clients come in and the problem they're describing is they can't agree about where to go for a family vacation and it turns into chaos in the family, right? And anxiety for mom and the kids and acting out behavior. If that's the problem they come in with, that's the problem, right? Even if we think that dad's pretty condescending to mom and he's pretty heavy-handed in the way that he deals with the kids when they start acting out with their anxiety, when the family can't agree about family vacation. We may be seeing all sorts of things that from our own biases, from our own perspectives, we may identify as problematic. That's not the problem we're working with in therapy. We keep our lines of inquiry within the parameters of the problem that the clients describe to us. What they perceive as problematic is the problem we address in therapy. So to keep this inquiry within those parameters involves a process of simultaneously acknowledging the problem and seeking to understand it as it's being presented to us by the client. And it involves us very subtly offering new understandings of the problem to step outside its original parameters. Okay, so this is that balancing of stability and change. Right, so we'd ask questions. So how exactly does this look when it happens in the household? So let's back up. What's the first thing that happens in your conversations about the vacation? Right? And then what happens next? Okay, and then what does mom say? Right? And then what's little Janie doing when mom and dad are arguing about whether they want to go to Aspen or Asheville? And then how does dad respond to Janie? And then how does mom respond to dad's responding, right? So these are all the questions that we might ask to seek an understanding of the problem, right? And then once we have a real sense of that problem, as the clients understand it, as the clients are experiencing it, then very subtly and very curiously, we begin to offer new understandings of the problem to step outside of its original problem-based parameters. So wait, I'm hearing that just about everybody in the family is, even if you're not all agreeing about where to go, pretty enthusiastic about the idea of going on a trip in general. So I wonder if you all were to throw a game night and instead of pulling out the game of life or apples to apples, you were to play a game called Guess Where the Cohen Family Goes Next. What might that look like? Janie, Bobby, what do you guys think about that? Can you imagine playing a game like that with your family? Right? Just one of many possibilities that might come up in the session. When we understand the exchange that's taking place, we understand how it's problematic. And then very subtly, from that place of understanding what the problem is, offering new possibilities or new understandings of the problem that free everybody up from being stuck in their problem-based perspectives to being able to fluidly and playfully look at new alternatives that take it outside of those parameters. What really sets family therapists apart is our systemic nature, right? We don't just look at problems residing within individuals. We look at problems as being a consequence of certain lines of communication, patterns of interaction, etc., within systems, right? We talked about that from the very, very beginning, right? And because we understand that every person within a system has a unique and valid reality and perspective and truth, and because we invite those multiple perspectives, realities, and truths into our offices, we have a really important job on our hands. And that job is to entertain all of those contradictory ideas at the same time. to acknowledge the multiple perspectives and multiple realities of the members of the systems that we work with, all at once. This is the means by which family therapists make sense of the presenting problems that our clients bring to us and non-judgmentally facilitate new dialogues that are aimed at broadening interpretation and meaning within the system. This is where we go back to that architect of language, master conversational artist stuff. Our job is to take all of the many diverse perspectives and viewpoints and realities of the people in our offices, the ones that are sitting there and the ones that are invoked through our conversation, even if they're not present in the room, and honoring and validating them and making sense of them. And then through the language that we use, working to expand them and shift them in such a way so that new interpretations and meanings are generated among the members of the system. And when those new interpretations and understandings come about, clients become free to participate differently in their exchanges with each other, because they're not so stuck in their own perspective, because they can understand the way their spouse sees it, the way their sibling sees it, the way grandma sees it. And they're flexible and they're open to creating change. That's how all of this works. And it only works when we're able to entertain all of those multiple perspectives, which are so often contradictory, of course. If they weren't, the clients probably wouldn't have come in describing whatever's going on as a problem, right? So this change is only possible when we can hold all those perspectives at once, honor and validate them, and not align with one versus the other, right? Doing all of that at once, and then in this very non-judgmental, craftful way, through language, through conversation, facilitate new dialogues that broaden the interpretations and meanings held by the various participants in the system so that change can come about. The third part of this contract for family therapists is that the therapist chooses cooperative rather than uncooperative language. What I mean by this is that our primary aim is to join with our clients through the language that we use. We're not interested in showing our clients how smart we are, how much we learned in grad school, how great we are as therapists, how skilled we are at diagnosing and recognizing symptoms and symptoms patterns and marks of pathology or dysfunction. Our efforts are not to impress our clients with our expertise or to impose on our clients our superiority. It's the opposite of that. Thinking like a family therapist means thinking like a collaborator. I tell my clients this almost invariably during our first session. This process works best when we're collaborating with each other, because I might be the expert in some things, maybe, but I sure as heck am not the expert in you and being you and living life as you and being part of your family. You are the expert in that. So I'm counting on you to bring that expertise. And I'll bring what I bring, which is creating space for us to have different kinds of conversations with each other. We seek to collaborate with our clients. We seek to join with them. And we do that through our presence and our language, using those tools, the ones available to us as family therapists. Number 4 in our contract, the therapist learns, understands, and converses in the client's language, because that language is the metaphor for the client's experiences. The words our clients use give us information about who they are and how they see and experience the world. This is a big one. This is the primary means by which we create a collaborative relationship with our clients that allows us to present possibilities for change that they'll be willing to accept. We enter their world when we enter their language, because their language is always communicating something about who they are, right? Heinrich von Forster, a constructivist theorist and writer, said, ask a man to tell you how the universe came about, and I will be able to tell you who that man is, right? And so what he meant by that is when we tell about something, we're telling about ourselves. When we communicate about something, we're communicating information that reveals something about who we are and how we see the world. Right? We've been talking about this kind of stuff since the class began. So when our clients are communicating with us, the language that they're using is a metaphor for their experiences in life. And so we can join with their experiences in life. We can enter their reality by entering their language and using their language. And using what we know about them metaphorically. I recently had a great session with a client who was suffering from really crippling anxiety and had found, because he had a particularly profound experience with meditation, that it was something he wanted to do more of. But he couldn't quite get around the whole having to sit silently for extended periods of time thing, because he was finding that it provoked his anxiety. This client also happened to be a bodybuilder and a fitness buff. He loved to work out. And so I was able to use this thing that I knew about my client, his love of physical fitness and exercise, and the language that he would use about that and about other things, his language in general, to enter his reality and present a new perspective about this other thing, the meditation. And so what I did was, I said, well, what if you were to think about meditation as mental push-ups, right? And I said, the thing about meditation is sort of the same thing about push-ups. You don't do push-ups at the gym to get better and better and better at doing push-ups, right? The purpose of doing push-ups is not to ultimately win some kind of push-up competition, in most cases at least. The purpose of doing push-ups is to condition all of the muscles that are involved in doing push-ups so that you can use those muscles in every other area of your life, both in the gym and outside of it, right? So that you can build up those muscles, which then you get to use all the time. Meditation is exactly the same. It's push-ups for your mind. It's not meditating so that you get really good at meditating. It's not meditating just to sit cross-legged or straight-backed for an extended period of time. It's to flex the muscle. It's to condition the muscle. Every time we meditate, it's as if we're doing push-ups. And the more we do it, the better we get at it. But not so that we can do more push-ups, so that we can use that muscle in every other area of our lives. So that when your anxious mind starts to invite you to zoom into this future of what ifs and scary possibilities and potential catastrophes, you can take a breath as you do in meditation and ground yourself back in the present moment. And you'll be able to do that when that muscle is well conditioned, because you did the push-ups, right? So that was an idea my client could really get behind. If I would have tried to sell him on the merits of meditation for his anxiety, if I would have tried to impress him with my expertise about meditation, if I would have tried to tell him that anxiety makes him sick and meditation will make him well, and that if he doesn't practice it, he's going to be stuck with his anxiety and stop resisting me and stop resisting this meditation that you found that's helpful, And here's all the many reasons why if you continue to resist it, blah, 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 blah. If I would have done that, would have lost the client. Maybe he wouldn't have stopped coming, but he certainly wouldn't have been open to new perspectives, new meanings, new possibilities, right? Because I joined with him, understanding from his perspective what the problem was, and allowing him to bring me this idea that came from him about what might be helpful, meditation. But this sort of stuckness that he was feeling about how to use the meditation to its optimal benefit. Because I was grounded there, and because I was attending to his language and his experiences and his reality and attempting to collaborate and join with it, I was able to introduce a possibility that he could co-sign on and that allowed him to be open to doing things differently and creating therapeutic change. So the words our clients use are always communicating something to us about who our clients are and how they see the world. They are constantly giving us opportunities and invitations to enter their world through their language. The fifth part of this contract for family therapists is that family therapists are respectful listeners who don't understand too quickly, if ever. Certainty, being sure that we've got it, being sure that we have pegged our clients. Oh, this is a borderline, textbook, classic, meets all the symptoms client, right? If you haven't been around therapists who think like that, you will at some point in your career. That kind of certainty limits our ability to see clearly what's actually taking place in front of us. It limits our ability to see our clients clearly. So family therapists assume a posture of curiosity and openness, always searching for new meanings, always searching for new interpretations. We never stop being curious, no matter how many hours we've logged with our clients, no matter how many similar cases we've seen, no matter how much we've read about a particular common presenting problem, no matter how much school we've done, no matter how long we've been a therapist. We can never rest on certainty, because once we think we're certain about our clients, once we think we know everything there is to know, we stop seeing our clients. We break contact with our clients. And all of these entries for new possibilities to emerge get sealed off. We are always searching for new meanings. We are always curious and seeking to know more about our clients and their unique realities. And we do this by asking questions, the answers to which are going to require new questions. So this can go on and on and on, always with the aim of understanding our clients more, broadening our understanding, and from that being able to derive new meanings and new possibilities. Questions are the tools that we have in our therapeutic conversations. And our questions are to be guided and informed by the views of the clients, not by our biases or our agendas. Each question we ask opens up more worlds to be explored. Every question that our clients answer brings about the next best set of questions for us to ask them, but only when we are in a position of curiosity rather than a position of certainty. So if we think that our clients' answers to our questions serve the purpose of us going, aha, I figured it out. Here's what's wrong with your family, and here's how we're going to fix it, right? You're not thinking like a family therapist. If you're thinking that the answers to your questions that the clients give you open up a little bit more understanding for you, so then you can get curious about this next thing. Oh, so how does that happen then? Oh, so then what does she do next after that? So how do you make sense of that, right? When you see the next best set of questions open up. And you go there with curiosity and interest. You know you're in the territory of thinking like a family therapist. Family therapists take the responsibility for creating a conversational context that allows for mutual collaboration in the problem-defining process. Therapy becomes a process of facilitating an elaboration of the multiple realities about the problem in the interest of maximizing the creation of new meaning. So what this is basically saying is our clients come in to us with some idea, some really fixed, rigid idea often about what the problem is. And they've already defined the problem in particular kinds of ways. My husband is the problem. If only he would stop being such a lazy bastard, then we wouldn't have to be here, right? You might hear something like that, right? My wife is the problem. She's such a nag. If she weren't such a nag, our marriage would probably be perfect. Our job is to facilitate an elaboration and expansion on the multiple realities of the people in the room about this thing that they define as a problem, so that everyone gets on board and everyone comes together and everyone coalesces around the creation of some new meaning of this interaction and exchange or pattern. One that will allow everyone to agree that it's no longer a problem. Now, as much as we are in conversation with our clients, and that is the fundamental tool that we use in therapy, we are also constantly in conversation with ourselves. When we're thinking like a family therapist, we hold all of our views and all of our ideas tentatively, and we know that they're subject to change. As a family therapist, I'm always prepared to negotiate or discard my views and opinions if they no longer fit with the client's experience. This happens to me all the time in session. I may think I'm going somewhere. I may think I'm learning something about a client that's offering me really helpful clues about what interventions I want to use. And then I might ask myself, wait a minute, am I pushing to make this so? Am I pushing to make this true? Am I asking these questions with an agenda? Because now I'm hearing this other thing and it's really making me think I was going in the wrong direction. So I'm going to back up and ask this other question, right? And I'm constantly in that process of talking with my clients and simultaneously talking silently, of course, in my mind, to myself and checking myself and ensuring that where we're going with this conversation fits with the client's experience and isn't being pulled and driven by my agenda, by my views. Here's a quote from Anderson and Gulishan. The therapist's competence is in providing an atmosphere wherein all have the opportunity for dialogical exchange. In doing this, clients demonstrate their own unique expertise regarding their lives, their problems, and their social realities. And this sort of sums up everything I've said so far. Family therapists facilitate a certain kind of environment where certain kinds of conversations can take place. And in those conversations, everyone's unique reality and perspective is given space, is heard, is understood, and is worked with. Everyone gets to demonstrate their own unique expertise on their lives, on their problems, on their realities. And we, the therapists, honor all of them. And as conversational experts, as architects of language, as agents of therapeutic change, we use what we learn about our clients' lives, problems, and social realities. We use the language that our clients use to enter their realities, to facilitate a different kind of conversation where new meanings can come about, new understandings can come about, and everyone in the room can feel freed up to do things differently. And that's where therapeutic change comes about. in family therapy. So going into some of the more pragmatic aspects of what it looks like to work as a family therapist, there is a position of the therapist that's espoused by Anderson and Gulishan and many other family therapists, which is referred to as the one-down position. This is essentially a stance that the therapist assumes as a means of intervention. It's an intervention in and of itself. And what it relies on is the therapist's attitude toward the client, which is a modest one. In the one-down position, the therapist should be perceived by the client as a human being with flaws, as opposed to a superior, powerful, or wise figure. Now, in some models, this is done strategically, going down, one down to go one up. It's sort of a playing at not really understanding, using sort of false humility, like maybe I'm just a total idiot, and sometimes I'm slow, I'm not really understanding it, so forgive me, but I'm having a hard time seeing how this behavior makes sense. I've just heard you say that you are not interested in having anyone in the family bother you after 8 p.m., but you're then turning up the TV really loud, and I'm hearing from everyone in the family that that sort of gets everyone bothered and they come in and bother you. So I might just be slow, but help me make sense of that. How does that make sense for you? Right? So that might be like a strategic intervention, a strategic way of getting the client to see something differently, of sort of provoking the client. You might see that in some models. That's sort of the approach used in the Tactics of Change book. The model that is espoused by the authors of that book. But Anderson and Gulishan are talking about this as a completely sincere and authentic position that the therapist takes. And this is how I use it in my work. I authentically believe to my core that I am no more wise, that I am no more powerful, that I am no more important than my clients. My education and my experience may have afforded me knowledge and maybe even expertise on some things when it comes to the therapeutic encounter, the therapeutic endeavor. But I sure as heck am not the expert on my clients' lives. And so I am always aware of this. And I always am mindful of presenting and positioning myself with my clients so that they recognize that I'm human, that I have flaws and limitations, that I am not the expert on everything, and that I am genuinely and sincerely and endlessly interested in understanding the world from their perspective as they live it. And guys, let me tell you, I have had sessions, and many therapists have had sessions, single therapy sessions in which clients leave and the problem that they came in with, especially this happens most especially with individual clients who come in and are plagued with some problem, and after one session, maybe two, they leave and it's no longer a problem anymore. And you know what changed? Someone listened to them. Someone really, really listened to them. Not with the intention of diagnosing them, not with the intention of finding out what's wrong with them and telling them, with the intention of understanding them. Sometimes that's enough to create therapeutic change. At the very least, it's essential to our position as a family therapist, to our ability to do all of the things that I've talked about up until this point in this lecture. The other stance that Anderson and Gulishan are known for is what they call the not knowing stance. And this is an attitude and a belief that the therapist can never fully understand the client's experience. It means being willing to doubt and to risk, to suspend our professional and personal ways of knowing. Oh no, sorry about this, guys. Looks like my computer wants to shut down on me. Let me wrap this up. It means working with humility. As Anderson says, the therapist is not an expert on the client's life. Thus, an interest in learning what a client has to say rather than in pursuing, telling, validating, or promoting his or her knowledge or preoccupations is the fundamental task of the therapist, to sustain this interest. We always want to know what our clients have to say. We always want to understand how things make sense for our clients. We're not interested in asserting our views on our clients. We're not interested in showing our clients how much we know, because we authentically believe and we act as if we believe that we can never fully understand our client's experience, because we don't inhabit their bodies and we don't live their lives. And when we know this, we never jump to certainty. And we're always willing to suspend what we think we know from our personal and our professional perspectives in order to really understand the world as our clients understand it. So the primary concepts we talked about this week were collaborative language, which is just a sort of general, all-encompassing way to talk about the model presented by Anderson and Gulishin and all of the sort of tenets and elements of the contract for family therapists that I talked about before in the previous slides. We also talked about the one down position, and we talked about the not knowing stance for therapists. So folks, I hope that you've enjoyed the material for this week, and I certainly look forward to discussing it with all of you on the discussion board. Have a great week, and we will talk soon.